There are moments when the world you know shatters in a single breath. For Ethan Cole, standing frozen outside his boss's office at midnight, that moment arrived wrapped in the sound of a woman who never cried, sobbing like her heart was breaking apart. Victoria Hayes, the CEO who could destroy careers with a glance, was begging someone not to take away a child. And as Ethan pressed his palm against that door, listening to the most powerful woman he knew fall to pieces, he understood that everything was about to change. The question wasn't whether he would step through that door. It was whether he could live with himself if he didn't. If you're watching from late at night somewhere in the world, wondering if love can survive when everything falls apart, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit like and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey reaches. The fluorescent lights of Hayes Corporation's executive floor hummed with the empty authority of a building that never truly slept. Ethan Cole had worked late countless times over the past 3 years, but something about tonight felt different. The silence pressed heavier. The shadows stretched longer across the polished marble floors. He gathered his laptop and the stack of reports Victoria would need first thing Monday morning, moving through the motions of leaving with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd done this too many times to count. His daughter Lucy would already be asleep by now at his sister's apartment across town. 4 years old, and she still waited up for him sometimes, clutching her stuffed elephant and asking why Daddy worked so late. The elevator down at the end of the hall would take him to the parking garage. 40 minutes home if traffic was light. Another night of microwave dinner and guilt about missing bedtime. But as Ethan reached for the elevator button, he heard something that stopped him cold. Someone was crying. Not just crying. The sound was raw and broken, muffled but unmistakable. It came from behind the closed door of Victoria Hayes' corner office, the room that overlooked half of Manhattan, like a throne surveying a kingdom. Ethan stood perfectly still, his finger hovering over the elevator button. Victoria Hayes didn't cry. That was a fact of nature, like gravity or taxes. In 3 years as her executive assistant, Ethan had seen her fire incompetent executives without blinking. He'd watched her negotiate billion-dollar deals with the cold precision of a surgeon. He'd stood beside her during board meetings where grown men turned pale under her stare. The woman didn't show weakness, ever. But that sound, that desperate choking sound coming from her office, that was weakness drowning in its own desperation. Ethan's hand fell away from the elevator button. He shouldn't go back there. Victoria valued privacy above almost everything else. She'd made it clear from day one that her personal life was a locked vault, and Ethan's job was to manage her schedule, filter her calls, and stay on his side of the professional line she'd drawn in permanent marker. But the crying continued, and beneath it, he heard her voice. Please, please don't do this. She's just a little girl. She needs stability. She needs... Victoria's voice cracked completely. Ethan walked toward her office door. I can provide for her. I have the resources. I have... Victoria's breath hitched. I know I work too much. I know I haven't been... I'm trying. I'm trying to be what she needs. Another voice responded, tinny and distant. Speakerphone, Ethan realized. Ms. Hayes, we've been through this. A woman's voice, clipped and professional. The preliminary evaluation raised serious concerns about your ability to provide adequate emotional support and a stable home environment for a child Ava's age. Your work schedule alone. I'll change my schedule. I'll delegate more. You travel internationally 4 times a month. You work 70 to 80 hours a week. You have no other family support, no partner, no network of... I'm her aunt. I'm her blood family. That has to count for something. Miss Hayes, family court isn't about bloodlines. It's about what's best for the child. Ava has been through severe trauma losing her mother. She needs consistency, emotional availability, a parent who can actually be present. I'm present! Victoria's voice rose sharply, then broke again. I'm here. I'm trying. What else do you want from me? Oh. The court wants to see evidence that you can actually function as a primary caregiver, not just a guardian who provides material needs. Right now, the evaluation suggests Ava would be better served in foster care with a family who, no, absolutely not. You're not putting her in the system. She stays with me. That's not your decision alone anymore, Ms. Hayes. The next evaluation is in 3 weeks. If you can't demonstrate meaningful improvement in your caregiving capacity and emotional availability, the court will have no choice but to... 3 weeks. Yes. Fine. I'll show you whatever you need to see. Just don't take her away from me. The line went dead. Silence fell like a guillotine. Ethan stood outside the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He should leave. He should walk away right now and pretend he never heard any of this. Victoria would be mortified if she knew he'd been listening. She'd probably fire him on the spot. But his feet wouldn't move. Because the woman on the other side of that door wasn't the Ice Queen CEO who terrified corporate executives. She was someone drowning, grasping for something to hold on to, and finding nothing but air. Ethan had spent 3 years watching Victoria Hayes from 6 feet away. He'd learned to read her moods in the set of her shoulders, her tone when she said his name, the particular way she drummed her fingers on her desk when she was thinking. He'd memorized the exact shade of exhaustion that darkened her eyes after international calls at 3 in the morning. And somewhere along the way, in the quiet spaces between meetings and the moments when she actually smiled at something he said, Ethan had made the catastrophic mistake of falling in love with her. Not that he'd ever said a word. Victoria was his boss. She was brilliant, beautiful, and so far out of his league they weren't even playing the same game. He was a single father who could barely keep his own life together, juggling daycare pickups and client meetings, surviving on coffee, and the desperate hope that he was doing an okay job raising his daughter alone. Victoria Hayes didn't need someone like him. She didn't need anyone. Except right now, she did. Ethan raised his hand and knocked. The crying stopped instantly. "I said I'm not taking any more calls tonight." Victoria's voice was sharp enough to cut glass, but he could hear the tremor underneath. "It's me," Ethan said quietly. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened 6 inches. Victoria stood there, and for the first time since Ethan had known her, she looked completely undone. Her hair had fallen loose from its usual perfect twist. Mascara tracked down her cheeks in thin black lines. Her eyes were red and swollen. She stared at him like he was a ghost. "What are you still doing here?" Her voice was flat, carefully controlled. "I heard you," Ethan said. Victoria's face went very still. "You shouldn't have. I know. You need to leave." "I know that too, Shas." They looked at each other across the threshold of her office. Victoria's hand tightened on the door frame, her knuckles white. "If you tell anyone about this, I won't. I'm serious, Ethan. If this gets out, if the board finds out I'm dealing with a custody case, I won't tell anyone." Ethan met her eyes. "But I can't just walk away and pretend I didn't hear that." "Yes, you can. That's exactly what you're going to do." "No." Victoria blinked. "Excuse me? You're fighting for custody of your niece. That's none of your concern. You're going to lose her in 3 weeks if you can't prove you can actually be a parent instead of a CEO. Ethan, and you have no idea how to do that because you've spent your entire adult life building a company instead of a life." Victoria's expression turned to ice. "Get out." "No. I will fire you right now." "Then fire me." Ethan didn't move. "But that won't change the fact that you need help, and I can help you." "I don't need—" "Yes, you do." Ethan's voice was gentle, but firm. "I've been raising my daughter alone for 4 years. I know what child services looks for. I know how to make a home feel stable. I know how to show up for a kid even when you're exhausted and terrified you're screwing everything up." Victoria stared at him, something cracking behind her eyes. "Why would you help me?" Because I love you," Ethan thought. "Because I've watched you carry the weight of this entire company on your shoulders for 3 years and never once complain. Because you're the strongest person I know, and right now you're breaking, and I can't stand here and watch it happen. Because you're a good person," he said instead. "And that little girl deserves to stay with family who loves her." Victoria's lips pressed together. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she stepped back and opened the door. "Come in." Victoria's office looked like a war zone. Papers covered every surface: custody documents, court filings, child welfare evaluation reports. A half-empty bottle of scotch sat on the desk beside a crystal tumbler. The city glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a million lights that might as well have been stars for all the warmth they provided. Victoria walked to the window and stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the skyline. "Her name is Ava," she said quietly. "She's 7 years old. My sister Elena died 6 months ago. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light." Ethan said nothing, just listened. "Elena and I weren't close. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years before she died. She thought I was cold, obsessed with work. She told me once that I'd turned into our father. Someone who could run a company but couldn't hold a conversation that mattered. Victoria's voice was hollow. She wasn't wrong. I'm sorry. Elena named me as Ava's guardian in her will. I didn't even know until the lawyers called. Suddenly I had a 7-year-old niece who'd just lost her mother, and I was supposed to. What? Be a parent? I don't know how to be a parent. I can barely remember to eat lunch most days. Victoria turned from the window, and the rawness in her expression made Ethan's chest ache. The first month I hired a nanny. A good one. I made sure Ava had everything she needed. Her own room, new clothes, enrolled in an excellent private school. I thought that would be enough. I thought providing for her materially was what mattered. But it wasn't. Child Services came for the first evaluation 3 weeks ago. They asked Ava questions about me, about our relationship, about whether I helped with her homework, whether we ate dinner together, whether I ever asked about her day. Victoria's voice cracked. Do you know what she told them? Ethan shook his head. She said I was nice but very busy. She said the nanny was the one who usually tucked her in at night. She said sometimes she didn't see me for days because I left before she woke up and came home after she went to sleep. Victoria sank into her desk chair, suddenly looking small. Victoria sank into her. The caseworker told me I was failing basic standards of emotional care, that Ava was showing signs of attachment issues because she didn't have a stable primary caregiver. They said if I couldn't demonstrate real involvement in her life within the next evaluation period, they'd recommend foster placement. 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks. Victoria looked at Ethan, and her eyes were desperate. I don't know what to do. I'm trying, but every time I'm with Ava, I feel like I'm failing. She's so quiet around me. She barely talks. I ask her questions, and she just nods and goes back to her room. It's like I'm a stranger to her. You basically are, Ethan said gently. Ethan, you've only been in her life for 6 months, and most of that time you've been at work. She doesn't know you yet. So how do I change that? How do I become someone she trusts in 3 weeks when I can barely get her to look me in the eye? Ethan pulled a chair closer and sat down across from Victoria's desk. First, you need to actually be present. Not just physically in the apartment, actually there. No phone calls during dinner, no emails after 7 p.m. When you're with her completely. I have a company to run. Delegate. I can't just... Yes, you can. Ethan's voice was firm. Victoria, you have an entire executive team. Use them. This evaluation isn't about whether you can close deals in Tokyo. It's about whether you can show up for a traumatized 7-year-old who just lost her mother. Victoria closed her eyes. Okay, what else? Moshi. You need to learn who she actually is, what she likes, what scares her, what makes her laugh. You need routines, real ones. Dinner together every night, bedtime stories, homework help, the boring, normal stuff that makes a kid feel safe. I don't know how to do any of that. So learn, and let me help you. Victoria opened her eyes and looked at him carefully. Why are you really doing this? Because I care about you more than I should. Because I've spent 3 years wanting to be closer to you, and this is the only way I know how. Because I know what it's like to be terrified you're not enough for your kid, Ethan said. When Lucy was born, my wife left 6 months later, just walked out one day and never came back. I was 28 years old with a baby who wouldn't stop crying and no idea what I was doing. I thought I'd ruin her. I thought she deserved better than a dad who was barely holding it together. But you figured it out. I'm still figuring it out every single day. Ethan smiled slightly. But Lucy's happy. She's smart and funny, and she knows I love her, even when I screw things up. That's what matters. Not being perfect. Just being there. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. What do you want in return? Nothing. Ethan, I mean it. I'm not asking for money or promotion or anything else. I'm offering because it's the right thing to do. Victoria studied his face like she was trying to find the catch, the hidden angle, but Ethan just looked back at her steadily, meaning every word. Finally, Victoria nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this my way. No one can know about this arrangement, not the board, not the other executives, no one. If word gets out that I'm struggling with custody issues, they'll use it against me. Damian Whitlock has been circling like a vulture for months, looking for any excuse to question my leadership. Hey, I won't tell anyone. And this is temporary, just until the evaluation. After that, you'll have proven you can take care of Ava, and my job will be done. Victoria's expression was unreadable. You really think we can pull this off in 3 weeks? I think you're the most determined person I've ever met, Ethan said. And when you decide you're going to do something, you do it. So yes, I think we can. For the first time that night, something that might have been hope flickered across Victoria's face. When do we start? Tomorrow. I'll come to your place after I pick up Lucy from my sisters. We can have dinner together. You, me, Ava, and Lucy. Let Ava see you in a normal family setting. Let her see what it looks like when adults actually pay attention to kids. Your daughter won't mind. Lucy loves meeting new people. She'll probably talk Ava's ear off about her stuffed elephant collection. Victoria almost smiled. Almost. Okay, tomorrow. She stood up, suddenly looking exhausted. Thank you, Ethan. I mean that. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to do this. You could have walked away and pretended you never heard anything. I couldn't, Ethan said quietly. Not when you needed help. They looked at each other across the desk, and something passed between them that felt like the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. Then Victoria glanced at her watch and winced. It's almost 1 a.m. You should go. Lucy needs you in the morning. So does Ava. Victoria's expression softened. I'll try. That's all anyone can do. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in Victoria's office over and over. The sound of her crying, the desperation in her voice, the way she'd looked at him when he'd offered to help, like he was either the answer to a prayer or completely insane. Maybe both. When Lucy padded into his room at 6:30 in the morning, clutching her stuffed elephant and demanding pancakes, Ethan pulled her into bed and held her close. Daddy, you're squishing me, Lucy complained, but she giggled and didn't pull away. Sorry, Bug, just missed you last night. Did you have to work really late? Yeah, but guess what? What? We're having dinner with some new friends tonight. A lady I work with and her niece. Her niece is 7, so she's a little bigger than you, but I think you'll like her. Lucy's eyes went wide with excitement. Does she like elephants? I don't know. You'll have to ask her. Oh, can I bring Mr. Trunks to show her? Absolutely. Lucy beamed and scrambled out of bed, already chattering about all the things she needed to pack to show this mysterious new friend. Ethan watched her go, his heart squeezing with love and terror in equal measure. He was about to wade into the deep end of Victoria Hayes' personal life, a place she'd kept locked and guarded for as long as he'd known her. He was going to see her vulnerable, struggling, maybe even failing, and he was going to fall even harder for her than he already had. This was a terrible idea. But as Ethan got up and followed Lucy to the kitchen to make pancakes, he knew there was no other choice he could have made. Victoria needed help. Ava needed stability. And maybe, just maybe, Ethan could be the bridge between them, even if it destroyed him in the process. Victoria's apartment occupied the top floor of a luxury building in Tribeca, the kind of place where the doorman wore white gloves and the elevator required a key to access the penthouse level. Ethan had been here exactly twice before, both times to drop off forgotten files during late-night emergencies. He'd never seen it in daylight, never seen it as anything other than an extension of Victoria's office, sleek, modern, and utterly impersonal. Lucy pressed her nose to the elevator glass as they rose, watching the floors blur past. Is this where the princess lives? She asked. Ethan blinked. What princess? The lady we're visiting. She must be a princess if she lives this high up. She's not a princess, Bug. She's my boss. Your boss lives in a castle? It's not a castle. It's just a really nice apartment. Lucy looked skeptical but didn't argue. The elevator doors opened directly into Victoria's foyer. Ethan stepped out, Lucy's hand clasped firmly in his, carrying a bag of groceries in his other arm. He texted Victoria earlier about cooking dinner together, figuring it would be easier than trying to order takeout and make it feel homey. Hello? He called out. Footsteps. Then Victoria appeared around the corner, and Ethan's breath caught. She looked different. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore jeans, actual jeans, and a simple cream sweater. No makeup, no armor. She looked younger, less like a CEO and more like a person. "Hi," Victoria said, and her voice was uncertain in a way Ethan had never heard before. Then her eyes landed on Lucy, and something softened. "You must be Lucy." Lucy stepped forward with the fearless confidence of a 4-year-old who'd never met a stranger. "Are you Daddy's boss?" "I am. Do you live in a castle?" Victoria's lips twitched. "No, just an apartment. It looks like a castle." Lucy peered past Victoria into the vast living room. "Where's the other girl?" "Ava's in her room. She's a little shy." "I'm not shy. I can go talk to her." Lucy started forward, but Ethan gently caught her shoulder. "Let's give Ava a minute, okay? She doesn't know us yet." Victoria's expression flickered with something that might have been gratitude. "I'll go get her," she said quietly, and disappeared down the hallway. Ethan moved into the kitchen and started unpacking groceries. The kitchen was massive, all gleaming marble and top-of-the-line appliances that looked like they'd never been used. He found pots and pans still wrapped in plastic. "Victoria?" he called out. "Do you actually cook here?" The nanny does," Victoria's voice came back. "Or did. I let her go last week." "You what?" "No." Victoria reappeared, this time with a small girl trailing behind her. Ava was thin and delicate, with dark hair pulled into a careful braid and enormous brown eyes that looked too old for her face. She wore a purple dress and held a book clutched to her chest like a shield. "The caseworker said having a nanny was part of the problem," Victoria said. "That I was outsourcing parenting, so I let her go." "Who's been watching Ava during the day?" "I've been working from home this week." Oh. Ethan looked at Victoria carefully. Working from home for her meant video conferences, international calls, and 16-hour days, but at least she was trying. "Ava, this is Mr. Cole and his daughter Lucy," Victoria said gently. "Just Ethan is fine." Ethan smiled at Ava. "Nice to meet you, Ava." Ava nodded but said nothing. Lucy, however, had no such reservations. She marched right up to Ava and thrust her stuffed elephant forward. "This is Mr. Trunks. He's my favorite elephant. Do you like elephants?" Ava stared at the stuffed animal, then at Lucy, then at the stuffed animal again. I don't know," she whispered. "You don't know if you like elephants? That's okay. Some people like lions better, or dinosaurs. My friend Marcus likes dinosaurs. Do you like dinosaurs?" "I like whales." "Whales are cool. They're really big, right?" The blue whale is the largest animal that has ever lived." Ava's voice was soft but precise. "Even bigger than the dinosaurs." Lucy's eyes went wide. "Really?" Ava nodded, and for the first time a tiny smile crossed her face. "Can you tell me about whales?" Lucy asked. Okay." The two girls moved toward the living room, Lucy chattering and Ava talking quietly about whale migration patterns. Victoria watched them go, something cracking open in her expression. "She hasn't talked that much to anyone in weeks," she said quietly. "Kids are good at that," Ethan said. "They don't judge. They just are." Victoria looked at him. "I don't know how to be like that. I don't know how to just be." "Then tonight we practice. Come here. You're going to help me cook dinner." "I don't cook." "You do now." "Ava needs to see you doing normal parent things. Cooking dinner is the most normal thing there is." "What muskichetash. Victoria looked at the groceries spread across her pristine kitchen counter like they were a complicated merger document. "Okay," she said slowly. "What do we make?" "Spaghetti. Easy, kid-friendly, hard to screw up." Victoria rolled up her sleeves. And for the next hour, Ethan taught Victoria Hayes, CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, how to boil pasta and make sauce from scratch. She was terrible at it. She oversalted the water. She nearly burned the garlic. She asked 3 times if the pasta was supposed to look that floppy. But she tried. She listened. But she tried. And when Ava wandered back into the kitchen and asked what they were making, Victoria smiled and said, "Dinner. Want to help stir the sauce?" Ava climbed onto a stool and carefully took the wooden spoon. And Ethan, watching Victoria guide Ava's small hand with infinite gentleness, felt his heart crack wide open. This woman, this brilliant, terrifying, untouchable woman, was learning to be soft, and she was beautiful doing it. Dinner was chaotic in the best possible way. Lucy spilled her juice twice. Ava dropped a meatball on the floor and looked terrified until Victoria just laughed and said, "Accidents happen." The four of them sat around Victoria's dining table, a massive thing that probably hosted board dinners. And for once, it felt lived in. "This is really good," Ava said quietly, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "You think so?" Victoria looked genuinely pleased. "Yeah, Mom used to make spaghetti sometimes, but hers was different. She put mushrooms in it." Victoria's expression faltered. I didn't know that." "It's okay." Ava's voice was small. "This kind is good too." Lucy launched into a story about her preschool teacher's pet hamster, and the moment passed. But Ethan saw the way Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. After dinner, Ethan helped clean up while the girls played in the living room. Victoria stood at the sink, washing dishes with the careful precision she brought to everything. "She talked about her mom," Victoria said quietly. "That's good." "I didn't know what to say." "You said the right thing. You acknowledged it. You didn't try to fix it or make it better. That's what she needs." Victoria was quiet for a moment, scrubbing the same pot over and over. "I don't remember what Elena liked," she said finally. "We grew up together, shared a room until she was 12, and I can't remember her favorite color or what kind of music she listened to. How do I help Ava remember her mother when I barely remember my own sister?" Ethan set down the dish he was drying and turned to face Victoria. "You ask Ava," he said gently. "You let her tell you stories. You look through photo albums together. You keep Elena alive for her, even if it hurts. That's what love is." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not enough?" "You're already doing it," Ethan said. "You made dinner with her tonight. You let her see you mess up. You didn't try to be perfect. You just tried. That's all anyone can ask." "The evaluation is in 2.5 weeks. Then we keep going. One dinner at a time, one bedtime story at a time. We build something real." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw the fear there, raw and honest. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, but you're not alone." "I've always been alone. Not anymore." Something passed between them then, fragile and new and terrifying in its implications. Then Lucy's voice called from the living room. "Daddy! Ava's showing me her whale books. Come see." The moment broke. Victoria smiled shakily. "We should probably supervise before Lucy reorganizes Ava's entire bookshelf." "Too late." She definitely already started. They walked into the living room together, and Ethan let himself imagine, just for a second, what it might be like if this were real, if this were his life, if Victoria and Ava were his family and this apartment was home. Then he pushed the thought away because that wasn't what this was. This was temporary. An arrangement. Help until the evaluation was over. After that, Victoria would go back to being his untouchable boss, and Ethan would go back to being the assistant who knew better than to dream about things he couldn't have. But tonight, watching Victoria sit on the floor with both girls, patiently explaining the difference between baleen and toothed whales, Ethan let himself have this one perfect moment, even if it could never last. The pattern became a routine faster than Ethan expected. 3 nights a week, he and Lucy showed up at Victoria's apartment with groceries and patience. They cooked dinner together, the four of them crowding into that enormous kitchen that was slowly starting to look less like a showroom and more like a place where people actually lived. Ava remained quiet most of the time, but she started asking small questions. She told Lucy about the marine biology book she was reading. She showed them drawings she'd made of humpback whales breaching the ocean surface, and Victoria tried. She tried so hard it was almost painful to watch. She came home at 6 instead of 9. She sat through entire dinners without checking her phone once. She read bedtime stories to Ava even though her voice was stilted and uncertain, like she was negotiating a contract instead of reading about talking rabbits. But she showed up. Every single time, she showed up. 2 weeks before the evaluation, Ethan arrived at the apartment to find Victoria sitting on the living room floor surrounded by cardboard boxes, her hair falling out of its twist and her eyes red. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his bag. "Elena's things," Victoria said quietly. "They've been in storage since she died. I finally had them delivered. I thought maybe Ava would want to see them." Ethan crouched beside her and looked into the nearest box. Photo albums, journals, a collection of seashells wrapped carefully in tissue paper, a blue scarf that still smelled faintly of perfume. "Have you gone through any of it?" he asked. "I can't." Victoria's voice cracked. "Every time I try to open one of these boxes, I can't breathe. I see her face in these pictures and I remember every terrible thing I said to her. Every time I chose work over family, every phone call I ignored because I was in a meeting. Boltowoski Wachi. Victoria, she called me 2 days before the accident," Victoria whispered. "Left a voicemail asking if I wanted to come to Ava's school play. I never called her back. I was in Singapore closing a deal and I thought I'd call her when I got home. But then I got busy and forgot, and then she was dead." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "I never got to say I was sorry. I never got to tell her I loved her. And now Ava is going to grow up thinking her mother's entire family didn't care about her because I was too busy building a company to build a relationship with my own sister." Ethan sat down fully on the floor and pulled Victoria into his arms. She stiffened for half a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing like the world was ending. He held her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would fix this. Some pain didn't have words. Some regrets couldn't be undone. After a long time, Victoria pulled back and wiped her eyes roughly. "I'm sorry, that was unprofessional. Stop apologizing for being human. I don't know how to do this, Ethan. I don't know how to be the person Ava needs when I couldn't even be a decent sister to her mother. You were sisters. Sisters fight. That's normal. Not like this. Elena and I, we didn't just fight. We stopped speaking entirely. She thought I was cold and ambitious and incapable of caring about anything except money and power. And maybe she was right. She wasn't right," Ethan said firmly. "You're fighting for Ava right now with everything you have. That's not cold. That's love." Victoria looked at him with something raw and desperate in her eyes. "What if it's not enough?" "Then we make it enough." The apartment door opened and Ava walked in with Lucy trailing behind her. They'd been at the building's rooftop garden, a space Ethan had discovered last week when both girls had gotten restless. Ava had spent an hour showing Lucy the different plants, her voice soft but animated as she explained photosynthesis. Both girls stopped short when they saw Victoria and Ethan on the floor surrounded by boxes. "What's all this stuff?" Lucy asked. Ava's eyes went very wide. She stepped forward slowly, staring at the contents of the nearest box. "That's my mom's scarf," she whispered. Victoria's face went pale. "Ava, Yes, these are your mother's things. I thought maybe you'd want to look through them, but we don't have to if you don't want." Ava dropped to her knees and reached into the box with trembling hands. She pulled out the blue scarf and buried her face in it. "It smells like her," Ava said, her voice muffled. "It still smells like her." Victoria's breath hitched. "You can keep it. You can keep anything you want from these boxes. It all belongs to you." Ava looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Can we look at the pictures?" "Of course." For the next 2 hours, the four of them sat on the living room floor going through Elena's life one photograph at a time. Ava narrated each picture, her voice growing stronger as she talked about the mother she'd lost. Victoria listened with an ache in her chest that felt like it might split her open. "That's Mom at the beach," Ava said, pointing to a photo of Elena laughing in the surf, her hair wild and her smile bright. "She loved the ocean. She said the ocean was where everything important lived. She was studying marine biology before she had you," Victoria said quietly. "Did she ever tell you that?" Ava shook her head. "She was brilliant, top of her class. She wanted to study whale migration patterns." Victoria's voice was soft with memory. "We used to fight about it. I thought she should go into business, something practical. But she said the ocean was calling her. Why didn't she finish school, She got pregnant with you. Decided to focus on being a mother instead. I told her she was wasting her potential." Victoria's voice broke. "I was wrong. She wasn't wasting anything. She was just choosing differently than I would have." Ava stared at the photograph, then at Victoria. "Do you think she'd be mad at me?" Ava whispered. "For living with you instead of remembering her better?" Victoria's heart cracked wide open. "Oh, sweetheart, no. Your mom loved you more than anything in this world. She'd want you to be safe and happy and loved. That's all she'd care about. But you didn't like each other. The words hung in the air like glass about to shatter. Victoria could have lied, could have smoothed it over with some comforting platitude about family always loving each other deep down. But Ava deserved the truth, even if it hurt. You're right, Victoria said quietly. Your mom and I didn't get along very well. We were too different. We wanted different things from life. And I said some things I can never take back. Like what? I told her she was naive, that she was settling for less than she deserved. I made her feel small for choosing to be a mother instead of having a career. Ava's lower lip trembled. Mom wasn't small. She was the best person I ever knew. You're absolutely right. She was amazing, and I was too stubborn and stupid to see it until it was too late. Victoria's voice was raw. But I see it now, Ava. I see it in you. You have her curiosity, her kindness, her love for the ocean, and everything in it. And I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how extraordinary your mother was. Ava looked at Victoria for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she reached out and put her small hand over Victoria's. Okay, Ava whispered. It was the first time Ava had voluntarily touched Victoria since moving in 6 months ago. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She carefully turned her hand over and squeezed Ava's fingers gently. Okay, Victoria said. Lucy, who had been sitting quietly beside Ethan the entire time, suddenly spoke up. I don't have pictures of my mom. She left when I was a baby, and Daddy says she didn't want to be found. Ethan's chest tightened. Lucy rarely brought up her mother. He'd learned not to push, letting her process it in her own time. That must be really hard, Ava said softly. Lucy shrugged with the easy resilience of a 4-year-old who didn't know any different. It's okay. Daddy says some people aren't ready to be parents, and that's not my fault. He says I'm perfect exactly how I am. You are perfect, Ava said seriously. You're my best friend. Lucy beamed. Really? Really, Shim. The two girls hugged, and Ethan felt something ease in his chest. Lucy had friends at preschool, but she'd never called anyone her best friend before. And Ava, who'd been so closed off and quiet, was slowly starting to open up. Maybe they were all healing each other, piece by piece. After the girls went to bed that night, Ethan and Victoria sat in the kitchen drinking tea. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant hum of the city beyond the windows. Thank you, Victoria said quietly, for being here tonight. I couldn't have done that alone. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Victoria traced the rim of her mug. The evaluation is in 12 days. I know. What if it's not enough? What if they look at me and still see someone who's too busy, too cold, too damaged to be a mother? Then they're wrong. Ethan, I'm serious. Ethan set down his mug and looked at her directly. I've watched you these past few weeks. You're learning. You're trying. You showed Ava her mother's things tonight, even though it was tearing you apart. That's not cold. That's brave. I'm terrified, Victoria admitted. Every single day, I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up and lose her. Welcome to parenting. The terror never goes away. You just learn to function through it. Victoria smiled slightly. Is that supposed to be comforting? Not particularly, but it's true. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria spoke again, her voice careful. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did your wife leave? Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd known this question would come eventually, but it still felt like swallowing glass. She said she wasn't ready to be a mother, he said quietly, that she'd made a mistake and couldn't live with the weight of it. She left a note on the kitchen counter and walked out while Lucy was sleeping. Did she ever try to contact you again? Once. About a year later. She wanted to know if I'd consider giving Lucy up for adoption so she could fully move on with her life. Victoria's expression went ice cold. What did you tell her? I told her to lose my number and never contact us again. Lucy is mine. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, and I will never ever let anyone make her feel unwanted. You're a good father. I'm a terrified father who's making it up as I go and hoping I don't screw her up too badly. That's all any of us can do, Victoria said softly. Then, even softer, can I ask you something else? Sure. Why are you really helping me? And don't say it's because it's the right thing to do. There's something else. Ethan's heart kicked against his ribs. This was dangerous territory. This was the line he'd promised himself he wouldn't cross. But Victoria was looking at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes that saw through every deflection, and he was tired of hiding. "Because I care about you," he said quietly. "More than I probably should. And I can't stand watching you hurt alone when I could be here helping you carry it." Victoria went very still. "Ethan, I know, I'm your assistant. This is completely inappropriate. After the evaluation, we can pretend I never said anything and go back to normal. But you asked, and I'm tired of lying." For a long moment, Victoria said nothing. She just looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then she stood up abruptly. "It's late. You should go. Lucy has preschool in the morning." Ethan's stomach sank. He'd gone too far, ruined everything. "Victoria, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Good night, Ethan." Her voice was flat, distant. All the walls he'd watched her slowly lower over the past few weeks snapped back into place like armor. Ethan gathered his things and left without another word. The next morning, Victoria didn't call, didn't text. Ethan sat at his desk at Hayes Corporation, running through emails and trying not to panic. Maybe she was just processing. Maybe she needed space. Maybe— His office phone rang. "Ethan Cole, we need to talk." Victoria's voice was crisp and professional. "My office. Now." Ethan's heart sank. This was it. She was going to fire him and tell him to stay away from Ava, and he'd destroyed everything by opening his stupid mouth. He walked to her office on unsteady legs and knocked. "Come in." Victoria sat behind her desk, every inch the Ice Queen CEO. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her suit was immaculate. Her expression was unreadable. "Close the door," she said. Ethan did. "I've been thinking about what you said last night." "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I was completely out of line." "Let me finish." Her voice was sharp. "You were out of line. You're my employee. There are professional boundaries that exist for good reasons. What you said crossed every single one of them." Ethan's chest felt hollow. "I understand. I'll submit my resignation today." "I'm not firing you." He stopped mid-sentence. "What?" Victoria stood up and walked to the window, her back to him. "I can't afford to lose you right now. The evaluation is in 11 days. Ava is finally starting to trust me. If you disappear, it will undo all the progress we've made." "So what are you saying?" I'm saying we continue exactly as we have been until the evaluation is over. Then we'll reassess." "Reassess what?" Victoria turned to face him, and for just a second her armor cracked. "Everything," she said quietly. Ethan's breath caught. "Victoria, don't say anything else right now. I can't. I need to focus on Ava. That's all that matters. After the evaluation, we can figure out what this is, but not now." It wasn't a rejection. It wasn't an acceptance. It was something in between, fragile and terrifying and impossibly hopeful. "Okay," Ethan said, "after the evaluation." Victoria nodded once. Then her professional mask slid back into place. "Good. Now, I need you to reschedule my Tokyo trip. I'm not leaving the country until after the court review." "Already done. Moved it to next month." And the quarterly board meeting delegated the presentation to Daniels like you asked. He's preparing now. Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You're very good at your job." "I try." "Don't ever doubt that you're essential to this company, Ethan, even when I'm difficult. Especially when you're difficult." She almost smiled. "Get out of my office before I remember I'm supposed to be intimidating." Ethan left, his heart hammering and his head spinning. 11 days. He had 11 days to help Victoria prove she could be Ava's mother. 11 days before everything changed, one way or another. He just had to survive until then without completely falling apart. The following week passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated normalcy. Victoria took Ava to school every morning instead of having a car service do it. They had breakfast together, awkward but present. Ethan came over for dinner 4 nights in a row, and each time Ava talked a little more, laughed a little easier, started calling Victoria Aunt Vic instead of Victoria. Progress. Real, tangible progress. But then Damien Whitlock called an emergency board meeting. Ethan found out when Victoria's calendar pinged with the update, scheduled for 2 days before the evaluation. He walked into her office without knocking. "What does Whitlock want?" Victoria's face was pale. A vote of no confidence. He's claiming I've been distracted and erratic, making poor leadership decisions. He has 3 board members already backing him. Can he actually remove you? If he gets a majority vote, yes. I'd be out as CEO within the week. But that's insane. You've increased company value by 40% in the last 2 years. It's not about the numbers, Ethan. It's about perception. Damien has been circling for months, and somehow he knows I'm dealing with personal issues. He's using it as ammunition. How would he know? Victoria's hands clenched into fists. I don't know, but he does. He made a comment last week about hoping my family troubles wouldn't affect my judgment. Someone's been talking. Who knows about Ava 8? You, the caseworker, my lawyer, and the nanny I fired. That's it. The nanny. Victoria's eyes went sharp. You think she'd... I think someone who got fired might hold a grudge. And Damien Whitlock is exactly the type to pay for inside information. Victoria swore under her breath. If the board finds out about the custody case, they'll use it to prove I'm unfit to lead. And if I lose my job, I lose any credibility with family court. They'll never let me keep Ava if I'm unemployed. So we make sure you don't lose the vote. How? Damien already has half the support he needs. All he has to do is convince 2 more board members that I'm a liability. Ethan thought fast. What if you beat him to it? What do you mean? What if you tell the board yourself, on your terms, before Damien can weaponize it? Miss Victoria stared at him like he'd suggested she set the building on fire. Absolutely not. The moment I show any kind of personal vulnerability, they'll tear me apart. Or they'll see a human being instead of a robot. Victoria, these people have worked with you for years. Some of them respect you. If you're honest with them, honesty is weakness in a boardroom. No, lying is weakness. Honesty is strength. Victoria shook her head, pacing. I can't stand in front of those people and admit I'm struggling. That's exactly what Damien wants. Then what's your plan? Wait for him to leak it and control the narrative? Victoria had no answer. That night, Ethan found her sitting in Ava's room long after the little girl had fallen asleep. Victoria sat in the chair beside the bed, watching Ava breathe in the dim glow of a nightlight shaped like a whale. I don't know what to do, Victoria whispered when Ethan appeared in the doorway. If I tell the board, I look weak. If I don't tell them, Damien will, and I'll look like a liar. Either way, I lose. You don't lose if you tell the truth and own it. You have a lot of faith in people's decency. I have faith in you. Ethan stepped into the room. You're the smartest, most capable person I've ever met. If anyone can walk into that boardroom and make them understand, it's you. Victoria looked at Ava's sleeping face. What if I lose her because I'm too proud to admit I need help? Then you're not too proud anymore. You're learning. Victoria closed her eyes. I'm scared. I know. But you're going to do it anyway, because that's who you are. For a long moment, Victoria said nothing. Then she stood up, carefully tucking Ava's blanket higher around her shoulders. Okay, she said quietly. I'll tell them. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Ethan wanted to pull her into his arms, wanted to tell her she was brave and strong and he believed in her completely. Instead, he just nodded. I'll be right outside the boardroom. If you need anything, I know where to find you. Their eyes met in the darkness, and something unspoken passed between them. 2 more days. 2 more days until the evaluation. 2 more days until the board meeting. 2 more days until everything either fell into place or shattered completely, and neither of them had any idea which it would be. The morning of the board meeting, Victoria threw up twice before leaving her apartment. Ethan knew because she told him in a clipped voice message at 6 in the morning, her words tight with panic she was trying to control and failing. He showed up at her door 20 minutes later with ginger tea and the kind of quiet presence that didn't demand anything from her. You don't have to do this, he said, watching her pace the living room in her suit and heels, her hair already perfect even though her hands were shaking. Yes, I do. If I don't control this narrative, Damien will, and I refuse to let that man decide what my life looks like. Ava emerged from her bedroom, already dressed for school in jeans and a sweatshirt with a whale on it. She looked at Victoria with those two old eyes and asked the question that made Victoria's careful composure crack around the edges. "Are you okay, Aunt Vic?" Victoria crouched down, smoothing Ava's hair back with a gentleness that still looked new on her, like she was learning a language she'd never been taught. "I have a really important meeting today. I'm a little nervous." "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where I have to tell some people the truth about something hard." Ava considered this seriously. Mom used to say telling the truth is scary, but lying is worse because it makes you small inside. Victoria's breath caught. Your mom was right. She also said brave people are just scared people who do the thing anyway. She said that? Oh, Ava nodded. When I was scared to start first grade. She told me being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It just means you don't let the fear win. Victoria pulled Ava into a hug, holding her tight enough that Ethan saw the little girl's surprise, then the way she melted into it. When Victoria pulled back, her eyes were bright, but her jaw was set. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I needed to hear that." "You're going to do good at your meeting," Ava said with the absolute certainty only children possess. "You're really smart. I hope you're right, sweetheart." Ethan drove Ava to school while Victoria headed to the office early. The little girl chattered about a project on ocean ecosystems her class was starting, and Ethan made the appropriate encouraging sounds, while his mind spun with everything that could go wrong in the next few hours. When he got to Hayes Corporation, the executive floor buzzed with the particular tension that preceded major board meetings. Assistants moved with quick efficiency. Junior executives kept their heads down. Everyone knew something big was happening, even if they didn't know what. Ethan settled at his desk outside Victoria's office and tried to focus on work. He failed spectacularly. Every email he opened blurred into meaningless words. Every phone call felt like an interruption from the disaster waiting to unfold down the hall. At 9:45, Victoria emerged from her office. She looked like she always did before walking into battle. Spine straight, expression cool, not a single hair out of place. But Ethan saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers worried at the ring she wore on her right hand. "You're going to be amazing," he said quietly. "Or I'm going to destroy my entire career in the next hour. Either way, I'll be right here when you come out." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, something raw flickering across her face. Then she nodded once and walked toward the boardroom. Ethan watched her go and tried to breathe normally. Inside the boardroom, 12 board members sat around the massive table that had witnessed countless corporate battles. Damian Whitlock sat directly across from Victoria's seat, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp with anticipation. He was a man in his late 50s who'd made his fortune in hostile takeovers and had never quite forgiven Victoria for being younger, smarter, and better at the job he thought he deserved. "Thank you all for making time on short notice," Damian began smoothly. "I've called this meeting because I have serious concerns about our CEO's capacity to lead this company effectively." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Margaret Chen, the CFO, who'd worked with Victoria since the beginning, frowned. "That's a significant accusation, Damian. What's your basis?" Victoria has been increasingly erratic over the past few months, missing key meetings, delegating critical decisions, working from home with alarming frequency. I've heard rumors of personal issues that are affecting her judgment. "Rumors," Margaret said flatly. "You want to remove our CEO based on rumors?" "I want to address legitimate concerns about leadership stability before they become a crisis." Matum. Thomas Brandt, another longtime board member, leaned forward. "Victoria, do you want to respond to this?" All eyes turned to her. Victoria sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table in front of her. Ethan had coached her last night on this moment. The pause before speaking, the control of the room, the framing of narrative. But sitting here now, facing people who could take away everything she'd built, Victoria felt the careful script she'd prepared dissolve like smoke. "Damian is right," she said quietly. The room went very still. "I have been distracted. I have been working from home more. I have delegated responsibilities that I normally handle personally." Victoria's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something human and raw. "And there is a reason for that." Damian leaned back, satisfaction flickering across his face. He thought he'd won. "6 months ago, my sister died in a car accident," Victoria continued. "She left behind a 7-year-old daughter. I am that child's legal guardian and only living family. I am currently in the middle of a custody evaluation to determine whether I'm fit to raise her." Margaret's expression shifted to shock. Several other board members exchanged glances. Damien's satisfaction wavered slightly, like he hadn't expected her to admit this so directly. "The evaluation process has been difficult," Victoria said. "I've had to learn how to be present for a traumatized child while running this company. I've had to delegate more because I refuse to be the kind of guardian who chooses work over a little girl who just lost her mother. Yes, I've been distracted. Yes, I've been struggling. But I have not let this company suffer because of it. The Tokyo deal," Damien started, "is proceeding exactly on schedule with Daniels leading the negotiation team. He's more than capable, which is why I hired him. The quarterly earnings exceeded projections by 8%. Our stock price is at an all-time high. The partnership with Chen Industries that you all voted to pursue is moving forward ahead of timeline." Victoria's voice grew stronger. "I have been dealing with a personal crisis while maintaining every professional responsibility. The only thing that has changed is that I am no longer working 80-hour weeks. I'm working 60-hour weeks and spending the rest of my time being a parent to a child who needs me." "And you think that's sustainable?" Damien asked. "You think you can effectively run a billion-dollar corporation while playing house with your niece?" "I'm not playing anything. I'm building a life that matters beyond quarterly earnings reports." "That's very touching, Victoria. But this board has a fiduciary responsibility." "To what?" Victoria cut him off, her voice sharp now. "To profit margins? To shareholder value? Yes, absolutely. And I have delivered on both consistently for years. But we also have a responsibility to lead with integrity, to recognize that the people running this company are human beings with lives outside these walls." She stood up, and every eye in the room tracked the movement. "I could have hidden all of this from you. I could have maintained the fiction that I'm some kind of machine who never struggles or doubts or fears anything. But I'm done pretending to be invincible. Yes, I'm fighting for custody of my niece. Yes, it's hard. Yes, I'm scared I'm going to fail her. But that fear doesn't make me weak. It makes me human. And the last time I checked, this company was built by humans, run by humans, and serves humans. Bought by Basambam Eat Batses. This is exactly the kind of emotional instability I'm talking about," Damien said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "No, this is honesty, something you wouldn't recognize if it walked up and introduced itself." Margaret actually smiled at that. "The question before this board is simple," Victoria continued. "Do you want a CEO who pretends to be perfect and lies about her life? Or do you want a CEO who tells you the truth, delivers results, and understands that success means nothing if you sacrifice everything that matters to achieve it?" She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "I will not apologize for loving my niece. I will not apologize for trying to give her a stable home. And I will not stand here and let Damien Whitlock use my humanity as a weapon against me." Silence fell heavy and complete. Then Margaret spoke. "I've worked with Victoria for 8 years. In that time, I have never seen her miss a deadline, botch a negotiation, or make a decision that wasn't in the best interest of this company. If she says she can balance both responsibilities, I believe her." "Agreed," Thomas said. "And frankly, Damien, this feels less like legitimate concern and more like a power play you've been planning for months." Damien's face flushed. "That's absurd." "Is it? You've been questioning Victoria's decisions since she was appointed CEO. You voted against the Chen partnership even though it's been wildly successful. You've undermined her authority at every opportunity. This isn't about her performance. This is about you wanting her job. I want what's best for this company. Then vote to keep the CEO who's actually delivering results instead of manufacturing crises." The meeting dissolved into heated discussion. Arguments flew back and forth. Damien tried to regain control of the narrative, but Victoria had already shifted the ground beneath him. She'd done exactly what Ethan told her to do, owned the truth before anyone could weaponize it. When the vote finally came, it was 9-3 against Damien's motion. Victoria remained CEO. She walked out of that boardroom with her head high and her hands steady. But the moment she rounded the corner and saw Ethan waiting, something in her expression cracked. "You did it," Ethan said. "I told them everything. I know, I'm proud of you." Victoria's breath shuddered. "I need to get out of this building before I fall apart. Come on." Ethan guided her to the elevator down to the parking garage. into his car. He drove without asking where they were going, just away from the office, away from the board members and the corporate politics, and the weight of maintaining that perfect facade. They ended up at a small park near the river, empty on a weekday morning except for a few joggers. Victoria got out of the car and walked to a bench overlooking the water. Ethan sat beside her and waited. "I almost threw up in the middle of my speech," Victoria said finally. "But you didn't." Damien looked at me like I was pathetic, like admitting I have a niece made me less capable of doing my job. Damien is an ass who's been trying to undermine you since day one. His opinion doesn't matter. What if he's right, though? What if I can't do both? What if trying to be Ava's guardian means I stop being good at the thing I've spent my entire adult life building? Then you figure it out. You adapt. You delegate more. You trust your team. Ethan turned to face her. But you don't give up on either thing just because it's hard. Victoria looked at him, and her eyes were full of tears she was too stubborn to let fall. The evaluation is tomorrow. I know. What if they decide I'm still not enough? Then we fight it. We appeal. We show them every single piece of evidence that you're exactly what Ava needs. What if it's not enough, Ethan? What if I lose her? The tears spilled over then, and Victoria didn't try to stop them. She just cried, the kind of crying that came from weeks of holding everything together and finally reaching the breaking point. Ethan pulled her into his arms and let her shatter. "You're not going to lose her," he said quietly. "I won't let that happen." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." They sat there for a long time, Victoria crying into Ethan's shoulder while the river flowed past and the city hummed in the distance. Eventually the tears slowed, then stopped. Victoria pulled back, her makeup ruined and her eyes red, looking nothing like the polished CEO who'd walked into that boardroom. "I look terrible," she said. "You look human." "That's not a compliment in my world, but maybe it should be, but..." Victoria almost smiled. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her whole body went tense. "What?" Ethan asked. "It's the caseworker. She wants to move the evaluation up to this afternoon instead of tomorrow. Can she do that?" "Apparently she has a scheduling conflict tomorrow. She's asking if I can accommodate a home visit at 4 p.m. today." Ethan's mind raced. "That's in 5 hours." "I know." "Besides, we'll make it work. I'll pick up Ava from school. You go home and make sure everything looks good. We'll be there by 4. Victoria looked at him with something desperate and grateful and terrified all mixed together. "What if I mess this up?" "You won't. You can't know that." "I know you. That's enough." Victoria's phone buzzed again. Another message from the caseworker asking for confirmation. Victoria took a breath, then typed a response. 4 p.m. works. See you then." She hit send before she could second-guess it. "Okay," she said. "Okay, this is happening." "This is happening," Ethan agreed. "And you're going to be great." Victoria stood up, smoothing her suit even though it was wrinkled from crying. The mask was sliding back into place, the armor reassembling. But this time Ethan saw the cracks in it, saw the person underneath who was scared and trying and hoping desperately that it would be enough. "I should go," Victoria said. "I need to clean the apartment, make sure Ava's room looks good, prepare something to say." "Victoria." She stopped. "Breathe. Just breathe. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present." Victoria nodded, but her hands were shaking again. Ethan drove her back to her car at the office, and she left without another word, already mentally running through everything she needed to do before 4 p.m. Ethan watched her go, then pulled out his phone and called his sister. "Hey, can you keep Lucy until this evening? Something came up." "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just need a few extra hours." "No problem. She and I were going to make cookies anyway." "You're the best." Was ist die Ansturm? Ethan hung up and checked the time. 3 hours until he needed to pick up Ava from school. 3 hours to make sure everything was in place for the evaluation that would determine whether Victoria got to keep her niece or lost her to the foster system. No pressure. He spent the next hour running errands. He picked up fresh flowers for Victoria's apartment. He stopped at a bookstore and bought a new marine biology book for Ava, something she could show the caseworker as evidence of her interests being supported. He grabbed ingredients for dinner, simple stuff that would make the apartment smell like a home instead of a museum. Then he went to Ava's school. She came bounding out with her backpack bouncing, her face lighting up when she saw him instead of the usual car service. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "Picking you up. Your aunt asked me to." Ava's smile faded slightly. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, but there's something we need to talk about on the way home." They got in the car, and Ethan drove slowly, buying time to figure out how to explain this to a 7-year-old without scaring her. "Remember how your Aunt Vic has been spending more time with you lately?" he started. "Yeah. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a lady who works for the court who needs to make sure you're happy and safe living with your aunt. She's coming to visit this afternoon to talk to both of you." Ava went very quiet. "Is she going to take me away?" "No, sweetheart. She just wants to see that you and your aunt are doing well together, Seb. But what if Aunt Vic is too busy? What if the lady thinks I should live somewhere else?" Ethan pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face Ava. "Listen to me. Your Aunt Victoria loves you. She's been working really hard to make sure you have a good home. She's not perfect, and she's still learning how to be a parent, but she cares about you so much, okay?" Ava's eyes were huge and frightened. "What do I say to the lady?" "Just tell the truth. Tell her about school, about your friends, about the things you and your aunt do together. Tell her about the whale books and the dinners we've been having. Just be yourself." "What if myself isn't good enough?" The question hit Ethan right in the chest. "Ava, you're more than enough. You're smart and kind and brave. Any family would be lucky to have you. But your aunt is fighting to keep you because she knows that. She wants you. Do you understand? She wants you to stay." Ava's lower lip trembled. "I want to stay too." "Then tell the caseworker that. Tell her the truth." Ava nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Ethan drove the rest of the way to Victoria's apartment with his heart in his throat. When they walked in, Victoria was in the kitchen wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down, looking more like a person and less like a CEO. The apartment smelled like cookies baking. Music played softly from somewhere. The dining table had flowers in the center. It looked like a home. Victoria saw them, and her whole face changed, relief and terror mixing together. "Hi, sweetheart," she said to Ava. "How was school?" "It was okay. Ethan said a lady is coming to visit." "She is. Her name is Ms. Patterson. She's very nice. And she just wants to talk to us for a little bit." "Am I in trouble?" "No, not at all. I just want to make sure you're happy here with me." Ava looked at Victoria carefully. "Are you happy I'm here?" Victoria's breath caught. She crossed the kitchen and knelt down in front of Ava. "I'm so happy you're here. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time. I know I'm not always good at showing it, and I know I work too much sometimes, but I love you, Ava. I really do." It was the first time Victoria had said it out loud. Ava stared at her, then threw her arms around Victoria's neck and held on tight. "I love you too, Aunt Vic." Victoria's eyes squeezed shut, and Ethan saw her hold Ava like she was the most precious thing in the world. The doorbell rang. Ms. Patterson had arrived. Victoria stood slowly, still holding Ava's hand, and walked to the door on legs that felt unsteady. Ethan hung back, trying to make himself invisible while still being present enough to help if things went wrong. He had no idea what the protocol was for custody evaluations, whether he was supposed to leave or stay or what, but Victoria hadn't asked him to go, so he stayed. Ms. Patterson was a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a clipboard that she carried like a weapon. She smiled at Victoria, but it was the professional smile of someone who'd seen every possible variation of family dysfunction and wasn't easily impressed. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for accommodating the schedule change." "Of course. Please come in." Oh. They moved to the living room and Ethan watched Victoria transform before his eyes. Not back into the CEO, that armor stayed off, but into something careful and controlled, like she was walking a tightrope and one wrong step would send her plummeting. "This must be Ava," Ms. Patterson said warmly, crouching down to the little girl's level. "I've heard a lot about you." Ava pressed closer to Victoria's side. "I love your sweater. Is that a humpback whale?" "Yeah, they migrate up to 16,000 miles every year." Ms. Patterson's smile became genuine. "That's a long journey. Do you like whales?" "They're my favorite. My mom liked them too." Something flickered in Ms. Patterson's expression. Approval, maybe, that Ava was comfortable talking about her mother. She straightened and looked at Ethan, who was trying to fade into the kitchen doorway. "And you are?" Ethan Cole. I'm Victoria's assistant at work. And a friend. I see. Will you be staying for the evaluation? Victoria spoke before Ethan could answer. Ethan has been helping me adjust to having Ava in my life. He's a single father himself, and he's been supportive. Miss Patterson made a note on her clipboard. That's fine. Sometimes it's helpful to have multiple perspectives. She settled onto the couch and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Victoria sat across from her, Ava curled against her side, and Ethan could see the tension in every line of Victoria's body. Let's start with some basics, Ms. Patterson said. Ava, can you tell me about your room? Ava perked up slightly. It's down the hall. Do you want to see it? I'd love to. They all trooped down the hallway to Ava's room. Ethan had only been in there a handful of times, but each visit showed more signs of life. The first time, it had looked like a hotel room, perfect and impersonal. Now it had drawings taped to the walls, books scattered on the desk, a collection of stuffed sea creatures piled on the bed. The blue scarf that had belonged to Elena was draped over the back of the desk chair. This is really nice, Ms. Patterson said, and she sounded like she meant it. Did you pick out the decorations? Some of them. Aunt Vic helped. She got me these. Ava pointed to a set of posters showing different whale species. And we went to the aquarium last weekend. That's where I got the stuffed dolphin. What was your favorite part of the aquarium? The beluga whales. They're so smart. The guide said they can recognize themselves in mirrors, which means they know they exist. Ms. Patterson smiled. That is pretty amazing. She turned to Victoria. Do you and Ava spend a lot of time together outside of school? Why? We're trying to establish routines, Victoria said carefully. Dinner together every night, homework help. Weekends we usually do something. The park, a museum, the aquarium. I'm learning what she likes. And what does Ava like? Books about ocean life, drawing. She's very good at art. She's quieter than most kids her age, but she's incredibly smart. She asks questions about everything. Ms. Patterson made more notes. Ava, do you like living here with your aunt? Ava looked up at Victoria, then back at Ms. Patterson. Yeah. Can you tell me why? She tries really hard. At first she didn't know what to do with me, and I didn't know what to do with her, but she's getting better. She makes dinner now, instead of ordering food. She reads to me at night, even though she's not very good at the voices, and she asks me about school every day. What about when your aunt is working? What do you do? I do homework or read. Sometimes I draw. Ethan's daughter Lucy comes over and we play together. Ms. Patterson glanced at Ethan. Your daughter? Lucy? She's 4. She and Ava have become close. And how often are you here? The question felt loaded. Ethan chose his words carefully. 3 or 4 times a week for dinner. I've been helping Victoria adjust to parenting, sharing what I've learned from raising Lucy alone. I see. More notes. Ava, when you first came to live with your aunt, how did you feel? Say. Ava's voice got quieter. Scared. I missed my mom. Everything was different and big, and I didn't understand why Mom wasn't coming back. Victoria's hand tightened on Ava's shoulder. And how do you feel now? Ms. Patterson asked gently. Still sad sometimes, but less scared. Aunt Vic says I can talk about Mom whenever I want. We have pictures of her, and we went through all of Mom's stuff together. Aunt Vic tells me stories about when they were kids. That sounds really healthy. Do you feel like your aunt understands you? Ava thought about this seriously. She's trying to. She asks a lot of questions because she doesn't always know what I need. But she listens to the answers. That's important. Ms. Patterson looked at Victoria with something that might have been respect. Ms. Hayes, during our last evaluation, you were working 70 to 80 hours a week. Has that changed? Well, yes. I've delegated more responsibilities at work. I'm home by 6 most nights. I work from here 2 days a week so I can be present when Ava gets home from school. And how has that affected your career? It hasn't. My company is performing well. I have an excellent team, and I'm learning to trust them more. Turns out the world doesn't end if I'm not personally involved in every decision. That must be a difficult adjustment for someone in your position. It is, but Ava is more important than any business deal. Ms. Patterson made a long note, and Ethan couldn't tell if that was good or bad. They moved back to the living room, and the questions continued. What did Ava eat for breakfast? Who helped with homework? What happened when Ava was sick? Did she have friends at school? Was she seeing a therapist to process the loss of her mother? Victoria answered each question honestly, not trying to make things sound better than they were. Yes, Ava was in therapy twice a week. No, Victoria didn't always know the right thing to say when Ava was upset. Yes, there had been hard nights when Ava cried for her mother, and Victoria felt completely helpless. But she was there. She showed up. She tried. Finally, Ms. Patterson asked to speak with Ava alone. Victoria's face went pale, but she nodded. Of course. Ava, is that okay with you? Ava looked nervous but nodded. Victoria and Ethan stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door cracked. Victoria immediately started pacing, her hands clenching and unclenching. She's going to ask Ava if she feels safe here, Victoria whispered. If she wants to stay. What if Ava says no? What if she tells the caseworker she'd rather be somewhere else? She won't. You can't know that. I was here when Ava told you she loved you 20 minutes before Ms. Patterson arrived. That kid wants to stay, Victoria. But what if she's just being polite? What if she's scared to tell the truth? Ethan grabbed Victoria's shoulders gently, stopping her pacing. Listen to me. You have been showing up for that little girl every single day for weeks. You've been honest with her, vulnerable with her, present for her. She knows you love her. She's going to tell Ms. Patterson that. Victoria's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. What if I'm not enough? You are enough. You've always been enough. You just had to learn how to show it. They stood there in the hallway, close enough that Ethan could count Victoria's heartbeats and the pulse at her throat. He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and promise her that everything would be okay. But this wasn't the time, and he wasn't sure if there would ever be a right time. The living room door opened and Ms. Patterson emerged with Ava trailing behind her. The little girl immediately went to Victoria, who pulled her close. Thank you both for your time. Patterson said. I have what I need for my report. When will we know your recommendation? Victoria asked, and her voice was steady even though Ethan could see her hands shaking. I'll submit my findings to the court within 48 hours. You should hear something by the end of the week. And can you tell us anything about your assessment? Ms. Patterson smiled slightly. I'm not supposed to give preliminary opinions, but I will say this. Ava is a resilient, intelligent child who clearly loves her aunt very much. And you, Ms. Hayes, have made remarkable progress since our last evaluation. Whatever you've been doing, keep doing it. It wasn't a guarantee, but it wasn't a condemnation either. Victoria's breath shuddered out. Thank you. After Ms. Patterson left, Victoria sank onto the couch like her strings had been cut. Ava climbed into her lap, and Victoria held her with a desperation that made Ethan's chest ache. What did she ask you? Victoria said quietly. If I felt safe here. If you were nice to me. If I wanted to stay. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're learning how to be my aunt and I'm learning how to be your niece, but we're doing it together. And that I want to stay because this is home now. Victoria's eyes closed and tears finally spilled down her cheeks. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you crying because you're sad or happy? Happy. Definitely happy. Ava wiped Victoria's tears away with small, careful fingers. You don't have to cry. Ms. Patterson was nice. I think she liked us. I hope so. Ethan quietly started cleaning up the kitchen, giving them space. He heard Victoria and Ava talking softly, Ava's voice bright and Victoria's rough with emotion. The timer on the oven went off. The cookies Victoria had been baking, and Ethan pulled them out before they burned. When he returned to the living room, Ava had fallen asleep against Victoria's shoulder, exhausted from the stress of the evaluation. Victoria stroked her hair with infinite gentleness. She told Miss Patterson this is home, Victoria said quietly. She called this place home. Because it is. What if the court doesn't agree? What if they decide I'm still not stable enough? Then we fight. We appeal. We show them every single piece of evidence that you and Ava belong together. Victoria looked at him with so much vulnerability it hurt. Why are you doing this? Really? You've spent weeks helping me, supporting me, holding me together. You could have walked away at any point. Why didn't you? Ethan sat down beside her, careful not to wake Ava. Because I love you, he said simply. I've been in love with you for longer than I want to admit. And watching you fight for Ava, watching you become this person who's brave enough to be vulnerable, it just made me love you more. Victoria stared at him. Ethan, I know. I'm your assistant. This is wildly inappropriate. After the court makes their decision, I'll submit my resignation if that's what you need. But I'm not going to lie about how I feel anymore. Life's too short, and I've watched you lose too much to waste time pretending. I don't want you to resign. Then what do you want? Victoria looked down at Ava sleeping in her arms, then back at Ethan. I don't know. I've spent so long being alone, being the person who doesn't need anyone. I don't know how to be anything else. So learn, the same way you learned how to be Ava's aunt, one day at a time. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll be terrible at it with someone who loves you anyway. Victoria's laugh was watery and broken. This is insane. You know that, right? My assistant is in love with me. I'm fighting for custody of my niece. My board tried to remove me this morning. My life is a complete disaster. Yeah, but it's your disaster, and you're handling it. I'm barely surviving it. Surviving is enough sometimes. They sat in silence, Ava sleeping between them like a bridge. Outside, the city glittered with a million lights, each one representing someone else's complicated life. But in this apartment, in this moment, everything felt strangely still. 3 days later, the call came. Victoria was in a meeting when her phone buzzed with the number she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. She excused herself, walked out into the hallway on shaking legs, and answered. This is Victoria Hayes. Yeah? You want to... Ms. Hayes, this is Judge Morrison's clerk. The judge has reviewed the caseworker's report and would like to see you in chambers tomorrow at 10 a.m. Victoria's heart stopped. Can you tell me what the recommendation was? I'm sorry, that information will be shared in chambers, but I can tell you that Ava should be present for the meeting. The line went dead. Victoria stood in the hallway trying to breathe normally and failing. A meeting in chambers could mean anything. It could mean they were granting her custody. It could mean they were taking Ava away. It could mean they needed more time, more evaluations, more proof. She called Ethan. Judge wants to see us tomorrow, she said without preamble. Both me and Ava. Okay, what did they say? Nothing. Just that we need to be there at 10. Victoria, I can't do this, Ethan. I can't walk into that courtroom not knowing if I'm about to lose her. Yes, you can. You've been doing impossible things for weeks now. This is just one more. What if it's not enough? What if everything we did, everything we built, what if it still doesn't matter? Then we'll figure out the next step. But right now, we'll figure out you need to breathe and trust that you've done everything possible. Victoria closed her eyes and tried to find the strength she'd shown in the boardroom, the conviction she'd had when she stood up to Damian Whitlock. But this was different. This wasn't about quarterly earnings or corporate politics. This was about Ava. This was about family. I need you there tomorrow, she said quietly. I know you're not family. I know you have no legal reason to be in that room, but I need you there. I'll be there. I promise. Rars Bontes. That night, Victoria sat in Ava's room long after the little girl had fallen asleep. She watched Ava's chest rise and fall, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell across the pillow, the small hand curled around the stuffed dolphin from the aquarium. If tomorrow was the last night Ava spent in this apartment, Victoria wanted to remember every detail. Please, she whispered into the darkness. Please let me keep her. I'll do anything. Just let me keep her. But the universe didn't answer prayers. It just kept spinning, indifferent to the desperate hope of one woman who'd learned too late how much love could hurt. The next morning arrived cold and gray. Victoria dressed carefully in a navy suit that was professional but not severe, her hair pulled back simply, minimal makeup. She looked like a woman who had her life together, even though inside she was screaming. Ava wore her favorite dress, the purple one with whales on the hem. She was quiet during breakfast, pushing cereal around her bowl without eating much. Are we going to find out today if I can stay? She asked finally. Victoria's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. The judge is going to make a decision. What if he says I have to leave? Then we'll figure out what to do next. But no matter what happens, I want you to know that I love you. And I fought for you as hard as I could. Ava's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you. Victoria pulled Ava into her arms and held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the small body that had become so precious. I want that too, more than anything. Ethan picked them up at 9:30. He drove through the city streets while Victoria stared out the window and Ava clutched her hand. None of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The courthouse was a massive stone building that looked like it had witnessed 1,000 broken families and would witness 1,000 more. They walked through security, up the stairs, down a long hallway to Judge Morrison's chambers. A clerk met them at the door. Ms. Hayes, the judge is ready for you. Victoria stood, smoothing her suit with trembling hands. Ava stood beside her, looking very small and very brave. I'm scared, Ava whispered. Me too, Victoria whispered back. But we're doing this together. They walked into the judge's chambers hand in hand, and Ethan followed 3 steps behind, ready to catch them if they fell. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. She sat behind a massive desk covered in files and legal documents, and when she looked up at Victoria, her expression was unreadable. Ms. Hayes, Ava, please sit down. They sat. Ethan stood against the wall, technically not part of the proceedings, but present anyway. Judge Morrison opened a folder and reviewed the contents for a long moment that felt like an eternity. I've read Ms. Patterson's evaluation report, she said finally. I've also reviewed the initial assessment from 6 months ago, the school reports, the therapy notes, and your employment records. Victoria's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. 6 months ago, I had serious concerns about your ability to provide adequate emotional care for a traumatized child. You were working excessive hours. You had no support system, and you showed limited understanding of child development or attachment needs. Victoria's vision started to blur. However, Judge Morrison continued, the current evaluation shows significant progress. You've reduced your work hours. You've established consistent routines. You've engaged with Ava's therapy process. Most importantly, you've built a genuine emotional connection with your niece. The judge looked at Ava. Ava, the judge looked at. Can you tell me how you feel about living with your aunt? Ava's voice was quiet but steady. I want to stay with her. She's not perfect, but she loves me, and I love her. Judge Morrison's expression softened almost imperceptibly. She looked back at Victoria. Ms. Hayes, raising a child is one of the hardest things a person can do. It requires patience, flexibility, and the willingness to put someone else's needs before your own. Based on the evidence before me, I believe you've demonstrated those qualities. Victoria couldn't breathe. Therefore, I'm granting you permanent legal custody of Ava Hayes, effective immediately. The world stopped. Victoria heard the words, but they didn't make sense at first. Her brain couldn't process them. She just stared at the judge, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the conditions and restrictions and ways this could still be taken away. But Judge Morrison was smiling now, a real smile. Congratulations, Ms. Hayes. You're officially Ava's legal guardian. Take care of each other. Ava made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and threw herself into Victoria's arms. Victoria caught her and held on, tears streaming down her face, every wall she'd ever built crumbling into dust. We get to stay together, Ava said against Victoria's shoulder. We get to stay together. Forever, Victoria choked out. You're mine forever. Ethan stood against the wall with tears running down his own face, watching the woman he loved hold on to the little girl who'd saved her, and he thought that maybe sometimes the world did work out after all. They stumbled out of the courthouse into the cold morning, and Victoria felt like she was floating. She'd won. She'd actually won. Ava was hers, legally and permanently, and no one could take her away. What do we do now? Ava asked, still holding Victoria's hand like she might disappear. Victoria laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical. I have absolutely no idea. I didn't plan past this moment. We celebrate, Ethan said. We go do something fun. What do you want to do, Ava? Ava thought about it seriously. Can we go to the aquarium again? I want to see the belugas. We can do whatever you want, Victoria said. Today is your day. They went to the aquarium. They spent hours wandering through the exhibits, Ava explaining every species with the encyclopedic knowledge she'd absorbed from her books. Victoria bought her a stuffed beluga whale from the gift shop, ridiculously expensive and absolutely worth it. And when they stood in front of the massive whale tank watching the gentle giants glide through the water, Ava slipped her hand into Victoria's and said, "I'm glad I get to stay with you." Victoria's heart, which had been broken and frozen for so long, cracked open completely. "I'm glad too, sweetheart, so glad." That night, after Ava had finally fallen asleep clutching her new beluga whale, Victoria and Ethan sat in the kitchen with cups of tea neither of them was drinking. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of the city, and for the first time in months, Victoria felt like she could actually breathe. "I keep waiting for someone to call and tell me it was a mistake," she said quietly, "that they need to take her back. That's not going to happen. She's yours." "I know. Logically, I know that. But I spent so long being terrified of losing her that I don't know how to stop being afraid." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "So don't stop. Be afraid. Be terrified. Just don't let it paralyze you." Victoria looked at their joined hands, then at his face. "Earlier, in the courthouse, you cried." "Yeah." "I've never seen you cry before. I've never watched someone I love win something that mattered this much before." Victoria's breath caught. "You meant what you said about being in love with me. Every word. I don't know how to do this, Ethan. I don't know how to be someone's aunt and someone's girlfriend or whatever this would be. I've spent my entire adult life alone by choice." "Then we figure it out together. Same way you figured out how to be Ava's guardian, one day at a time." "What about work? You're still my assistant. That's a nightmare for HR." "In my sweats. Then I'll transfer to a different department or find a new job. I don't care about the logistics, Victoria. I care about you." Victoria pulled her hand back, standing up and walking to the window. The city sprawled below her, millions of lights representing millions of lives, all of them complicated and messy and trying to figure things out. "My sister died hating me," she said quietly. "We spent years not speaking because I was too proud and too busy to fix what was broken between us. And then she was gone, and I never got the chance to tell her I was sorry. Victoria, I used to think being alone made me strong, that not needing anyone meant I was in control. But all it did was make me empty. I built this entire empire, and when I stood at Elena's funeral, I realized I had no one to share it with, no one who actually knew me beyond the boardroom version." She turned to face Ethan, and her eyes were bright with tears. "Ava saved me, not the other way around. When I thought I was going to lose her, I realized that the only things in my life that actually mattered were the things I'd been too scared to reach for. Connection, family, love." "You're not too scared anymore," Ethan said gently. "I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway." "Then do this too. Let me love you. Let yourself love me back." Victoria crossed the kitchen and stood in front of him, close enough to touch, but not touching yet. "If we do this, everything changes. Our whole dynamic at work, our relationship with Ava, everything." "I know. And it might not work. We might be terrible at it. We might realize we're better as friends or colleagues or whatever we've been for the past 3 years. Or we might be great at it. We might build something real." Victoria reached out and cupped his face with one hand, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "You've been so patient with me, so kind. Even when I was falling apart, you just stayed. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You stay." Victoria kissed him then, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't smooth or perfect or cinematic. It was desperate and messy and tasted like tears and tea. But it was real, and that made it perfect in its own broken way. When they pulled apart, Ethan was smiling. "So is that a yes?" "That's a let's try and see what happens. Y'all?" "I'll take it." The next few weeks were strange and wonderful and occasionally terrible. Ethan submitted his resignation as Victoria's assistant, and HR moved him to a different division where the conflict of interest wasn't an issue. Victoria promoted someone from within to take his place, a sharp young woman named Sarah, who was smart enough to do the job and ambitious enough not to need constant supervision. At first, not having Ethan 6 feet away all day felt wrong. Victoria kept turning to ask him something and finding Sarah instead, and it took her brain a moment to adjust. But in the evenings, when he showed up at her apartment with Lucy in tow, when they all had dinner together like some kind of makeshift family, it felt right in a way nothing else ever had. Ava and Lucy became inseparable. They did homework together, played elaborate games involving stuffed animals and complex ocean-based storylines, and occasionally fought over minor things the way siblings do. Watching them, Victoria started to understand what a family was supposed to look like. Not perfect, not always harmonious, but real and present and trying. But not everything was easy. 3 weeks after the custody decision, Ava woke up screaming in the middle of the night. Victoria ran to her room to find the little girl tangled in her sheets, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? What happened?" "I dreamed Mom was alive and she was looking for me, but I couldn't find her. I kept calling for her, but she couldn't hear me." Victoria climbed into bed beside Ava and held her while she cried. There were no words that would make this better. No amount of love or stability could erase the fact that Ava's mother was gone and never coming back. "I miss her so much," Ava sobbed. "Sometimes I try really hard to remember what her voice sounded like, but I can't. I'm forgetting her." "You're not forgetting her, baby. You're just healing, and that's okay. Your mom would want you to heal." "But what if I forget everything? What if one day I can't remember her at all?" Victoria thought about Elena, about all the years they'd wasted being angry at each other, about all the conversations they'd never have. "We won't let that happen. We'll keep telling stories about her. We'll look at pictures. We'll visit the places she loved. We'll make sure you always remember how much she loved you." "Do you miss her?" The question hit Victoria hard. Did she miss Elena? She missed the sister Elena could have been if they'd both been different people. She missed the relationship they'd never managed to build. "I miss the version of us that never got to exist," Victoria said honestly. "I miss what we could have been if we'd tried harder. But I'm grateful for you, Ava, because you're the best parts of her. And getting to know you is like getting a second chance." Ava curled against Victoria's side, her crying slowing to hiccups. "Can you tell me a story about when you and Mom were kids?" So Victoria did. She talked about the summer they were 8 and 10, when Elena had convinced her to sneak out at night to watch the stars. They'd gotten caught by their father and grounded for a week, but Elena had said it was worth it because she'd seen a shooting star and made a wish. "What did she wish for?" Ava asked sleepily. "She never told me. She said if you tell someone your wish, it won't come true." Ava was quiet for a long moment, then, barely a whisper, "I think she wished for you to be happy, because she loved you even when you were fighting." Victoria's throat closed up. She held Ava tighter and whispered into the darkness, "I love you too, Elena. I'm sorry I never said it enough when you were here." Ava fell back asleep in Victoria's arms, and Victoria stayed there until morning, watching her niece breathe and thinking about all the ways life broke people and put them back together in different shapes. 2 months after the custody decision, Damien Whitlock tried one more time to undermine Victoria's position. He called a shareholder meeting and presented a case for why the company needed fresh leadership and a CEO who could commit fully to the role. Victoria walked into that meeting with Ethan's words echoing in her head. Honesty is strength, not weakness. And she told the shareholders the truth. "Damien is right that I've changed," she said, standing before a room full of people who could end her career with a vote. "I used to work 80-hour weeks. I used to believe that success meant sacrificing everything else. I used to think being a CEO meant being invincible." She looked at Damien, then back at the shareholders. "But I was wrong. Success doesn't mean working yourself into the ground. It means building something sustainable. I have a daughter now." Technically, Ava was her niece, but the word daughter felt right, so Victoria used it. "And she has made me a better leader. Not despite taking time for her, but because of it. I'm more efficient now. I delegate better. I trust my team more. And this company is thriving because of those changes, not in spite of them." She pulled up the financial reports on the screen behind her. Revenue is up 18% from last year. Our stock price has increased 23%. Employee satisfaction scores are at an all-time high because we've implemented better work-life balance policies across the board. We're not just making money, we're building a company people actually want to work for. Victoria looked around the room. So yes, I've changed. I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my humanity for profit margins, but I'm still the best person to lead this company. And if you disagree, vote me out. But know that you're not voting for better leadership. You're voting for a return to the kind of toxic work culture that burns people out and destroys lives. She sat down. The vote wasn't even close. Damien lost by a landslide, and 3 days later he resigned from the board entirely. Margaret Chen found Victoria in her office afterward and smiled. That was the best shareholder meeting I've ever attended. You made them feel like they were part of something that mattered instead of just a profit machine. I meant every word. I know. That's why it worked. Margaret hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you happy? Victoria thought about Ava curled up on the couch reading a book about whales, about Lucy's laughter filling the apartment, about Ethan's hand in hers as they walked through the park. Yeah, she said, surprised by how true it was. I actually am. Good. You deserve it. 6 months after the custody decision, Ethan and Victoria took both girls to the beach for the weekend. It was Ava's idea. She'd been reading about tide pools and wanted to see them in person. They rented a small house right on the water and spent 2 days building sandcastles, collecting shells, and letting the ocean wash away the stress of daily life. Lucy was fearless, running straight into the waves and shrieking with delight. Ava was more cautious, but Ethan coaxed her into the water, and soon she was laughing too. Victoria sat on the beach watching all of them, and Ethan came and sat beside her, dripping wet and covered in sand. You're getting me all wet, she complained, but she was smiling. That's the point of the beach. Everyone gets wet and sandy and uncomfortable. I'm starting to understand why people enjoy this. Are you, though? Victoria laughed. No, but I'm enjoying watching Ava enjoy it, which is close enough. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the girls chase waves. I've been thinking, Ethan said carefully, about the future. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just big. He took a breath. My lease is up next month, and I've been spending most nights at your place anyway. Lucy's basically living there on weekends. It seems silly to keep paying for an apartment I barely use. Victoria's heart started beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should make this official. Move in together properly. Combine our chaos into one location instead of splitting it between two. That's a huge step. I know, and if you're not ready, that's okay. We can wait. But Victoria, I love you. I love Ava. Our daughters are basically sisters already. This thing we're building, I want to build it all the way. Victoria looked at Ava and Lucy, at the way they held hands when a big wave came, at the way they looked out for each other. Ava still has nightmares sometimes, she said quietly. She still cries for her mother. There are days when she won't talk to me at all because she's so angry that Elena is gone. It's not perfect, I know. And Lucy is 4. She's going to need so much attention and patience. She's going to get jealous sometimes that she has to share you with Ava. It's going to be complicated. I know that too, Sat. And we're going to fight. We're going to have terrible days where we wonder why we thought this was a good idea. Ethan took her hand. Victoria, I don't want perfect. Perfect is boring and fake and impossible. I want real. I want messy. I want to build something that matters even when it's hard. Victoria looked at him. Victoria, this man who'd seen her at her absolute worst and hadn't flinched, who'd held her together when she was falling apart, who loved her not despite her flaws, but including them. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Let's build something real. Ethan kissed her, and the girls saw and came running over, sandy and wet and full of questions about why the adults were being weird. But they were smiling too, because even at 4 and 7, they understood that something good was happening. They moved in together a month later. It was chaotic and messy and occasionally frustrating. 2 families merging into one meant negotiating everything from bedroom arrangements to house rules to whose turn it was to pick the movie. But they figured it out, one day at a time, one compromise at a time. Ava's nightmares became less frequent. She started sleeping through the night more often, and when she did wake up scared, she'd pad down the hall to Victoria's room and climb into bed without saying a word. Victoria would hold her until she fell back asleep, and in the morning, neither of them would mention it. Lucy adjusted to having a big sister with enthusiasm that bordered on worship. She followed Ava everywhere, copying her mannerisms, asking endless questions about whales and ocean life. Sometimes Ava found it annoying, but mostly she was patient, explaining things with the same careful detail she'd learned from her mother. And Victoria learned how to be present. Not perfect, she still worked too much sometimes, still got stressed about board meetings and quarterly reports. But she came home for dinner. She helped with homework. She showed up to school plays and parent-teacher conferences. She learned that being a parent wasn't about getting everything right. It was about trying and showing up and loving fiercely, even when you had no idea what you were doing. 1 year after the custody decision, on a quiet Saturday afternoon in early spring, Ethan took Victoria to the park where they'd sat the day after the board meeting. The girls were with Victoria's assistant Sarah, who'd become an unexpected friend and occasional babysitter. They walked along the river, and Victoria could tell Ethan was nervous about something. He kept fidgeting with something in his pocket, his conversation more stilted than usual. "Are you okay?" she asked finally. "Yeah, I have something I want to ask you, and I'm terrified you're going to say it's too soon or too much or Ethan, just ask." He stopped walking and turned to face her, pulling a small box from his pocket. Victoria's breath caught. "I know we've only been officially together for a year," Ethan said, his voice unsteady. "And I know we're still figuring things out, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life figuring things out with you. I want to wake up next to you when we're 70 and still arguing about who forgot to buy milk. I want to watch our daughters grow up together. I want to build something permanent." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring that was exactly Victoria's style, elegant and understated. "Marry me. Not because it makes sense on paper or because it's the next logical step. Marry me because I love you, and I choose you, and I want to keep choosing you every day for the rest of our lives." Victoria looked at the ring, then at Ethan's face, then at the river flowing past them, the same way it had been flowing for centuries, indifferent to human drama but somehow bearing witness to it anyway. A year ago, she would have said no, would have listed all the reasons why marriage was a bad idea, why she wasn't ready, why commitment meant losing control. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that control was an illusion and love was the only thing that actually mattered. "Yes," she said, and she was crying and smiling at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and they stood there holding each other while the world continued spinning around them. They told the girls that night over ice cream, and Lucy cheered like this was the best news she'd ever heard. Ava was quieter, but she smiled and said, "Does this mean we're really a family now?" "We've been a family for a while," Victoria said gently. "This just makes it official." "Good. I like being a family with you, Sets." The wedding happened 4 months later. Small and intimate, just close friends and family. Ava and Lucy were flower girls, wearing matching dresses in different shades of blue and carrying bouquets of sea lavender. They walked down the aisle, scattering petals with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Lucy threw hers in dramatic fistfuls, while Ava carefully placed each one. Victoria wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet that included forget-me-nots, Elena's favorite flower. It was a small acknowledgement of the sister who wasn't there, but whose absence had brought Victoria to this moment anyway. When Ethan said his vows, he talked about the night he'd heard Victoria crying behind her office door and decided he couldn't walk away. About how love sometimes meant stepping into someone else's chaos and choosing to stay. About building a life from broken pieces and finding that the cracks were where the light got in. Victoria's vows were shorter but no less honest. "I spent most of my life believing that being alone made me strong," she said, looking at Ethan through tears. "That needing someone was weakness. You taught me that the opposite is true. That letting someone in, letting yourself be vulnerable, letting yourself love and be loved, that's the bravest thing anyone can do. You've seen me at my worst, and you're still here. That's the kind of strength I want to build my life on." They exchanged rings, kissed, and became a family in the eyes of the law and the world. At the reception, Ava gave a small speech that Victoria hadn't known was coming. "My mom died a year and a half ago," Ava said, her voice quiet but steady. "And I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never be happy again. But then Aunt Victoria, she fought for me even though she had no idea what she was doing. She messed up a lot. She still messes up sometimes." Victoria laughed through tears. But she keeps trying, and Ethan keeps trying, and Lucy keeps making everything more fun, and somehow we became a family. Not the family I had before, but a new one. And I think my mom would be happy about that. She always said families aren't just about blood. They're about who shows up and stays. Ava looked at Victoria. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying. Victoria couldn't speak, could barely breathe around the love and grief and gratitude all tangled together in her chest. She just held out her arms, and Ava walked into them, and they held each other while everyone applauded. Later that night, after the girls had fallen asleep in the hotel room and Ethan was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, Victoria stood at the window looking out at the city lights. She thought about the night this had all started. Standing outside her office at midnight, crying on a phone call about losing Ava, believing she was completely alone. She thought about Elena, about the relationship they'd never had, and the niece who carried her memory forward. She thought about all the ways life broke people, and all the ways love put them back together in new shapes that were different but whole. You okay? Ethan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Yeah, just thinking about how different everything is now. Good different or bad different? Good. Definitely good. Victoria leaned back against him. I was so empty before. I didn't even realize how empty until Ava filled all those spaces I didn't know were hollow. You weren't empty. You were just waiting. For what? For someone to show you that being strong doesn't mean being alone. That you could be powerful and vulnerable at the same time. That love doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to admit you're human. Victoria turned in his arms and kissed him softly. Thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for learning it. They stood there for a long time, two broken people who'd found each other in the middle of their respective disasters and built something beautiful from the wreckage. 5 years later, Ava was 12 and thriving. She'd joined the marine biology club at school and talked constantly about wanting to study oceanography in college. She still had hard days when she missed her mother, but they were fewer and farther between. She'd learned to carry Elena's memory without letting it destroy her. Lucy was 9 and as bright and chaotic as ever. She and Ava fought like real sisters now, over bathroom time, over whose turn it was to pick the TV show, over petty slights that Victoria and Ethan had to mediate. But they also defended each other fiercely, and Victoria had caught them more than once asleep in the same bed after a movie night, curled together like puppies. Victoria still ran her company, but she'd restructured her entire approach to leadership. She championed work-life balance policies, flexible schedules, parental leave that actually made sense. She talked openly in interviews about being a working mother and how it had made her better at her job, not worse. She became the kind of CEO who proved you didn't have to choose between career and family. You just had to build a life that made room for both. And Ethan, who'd started his own consulting firm helping other single parents navigate the corporate world, watched his wife become the person he'd always known she could be. On a quiet evening in late summer, the four of them sat on their apartment balcony watching the sunset paint the city gold. Ava was reading a book about deep-sea exploration. Lucy was drawing pictures of imaginary ocean creatures. Ethan was checking something on his phone, and Victoria was just sitting, being present, being still. Mom? Ava said. She'd started calling Victoria that about 2 years ago, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. Yes, sweetheart? Do you ever wish things had been different? Like that my biological mom was still alive and you didn't have to take me in? Victoria set down her tea and looked at Ava carefully. These questions came up sometimes, usually when Ava was processing something emotional. I wish your mom was still alive, Victoria said honestly. I wish you hadn't lost her so young. I wish Elena and I had fixed our relationship before it was too late. I wish a lot of things about how we got here. But I don't wish you weren't my daughter. I don't wish I hadn't fought for you. I don't wish our family didn't exist. You and Lucy and your dad, you're the best things in my life. I wouldn't trade this for anything. Ava smiled, small and genuine. Good, because I wouldn't trade it either. Lucy looked up from her drawing. Are we having a feelings moment? Can I join? Come here, Bug, Ethan said, and Lucy scrambled into his lap, and somehow they all ended up in a tangled pile of arms and laughter and love. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Victoria sat beside Ethan in the quiet darkness of their bedroom. "I never thought I'd have this," she said softly. "A family. A real one. Not just the broken version I grew up with. I thought I was too damaged, too cold, too focused on work to ever let anyone in. And now I know that was just fear. I was scared of needing someone because needing meant risking loss. But loss happens anyway. Elena died whether I loved her well or not. The only thing I controlled was whether I let myself love the people I have right now, while I still have them." Ethan took her hand. "That's what I love about you. You're brave enough to admit when you were wrong and wise enough to learn from it. I learned from you, and from Ava, and even from Lucy, who's never met an emotion she couldn't express at full volume." They both laughed. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "Taking on me and all my mess?" "Not once. Not even on the really hard days. There have been a lot of hard days. And we got through all of them, together." Victoria thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, alone in her office, crying on the phone, terrified of losing a niece she barely knew. That woman had thought she had to carry everything alone, that asking for help meant admitting defeat. But she'd been wrong. The truth was simpler and harder than she'd ever imagined. Love wasn't something you earned by being perfect. It was something you built by showing up, being honest, and choosing each other even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. "I'm glad you heard me that night," Victoria said quietly. "I'm glad you didn't walk away. I'm glad you let me in." They sat in the comfortable silence of two people who didn't need words to understand each other. And Victoria thought about how strange and beautiful life was. How tragedy could turn into blessing. How the worst thing that ever happened could lead to the best thing. She couldn't go back and fix her relationship with Elena. Couldn't undo the years they'd wasted being angry and distant. Couldn't tell her sister she was sorry, or that she loved her, or that she was doing her best to raise Elena's daughter with the same kind of fierce, protective love Elena would have given. But she could honor Elena's memory by being present, by showing up, by loving Ava not despite her flaws but including them, by building the kind of family she and Elena never had, one where people talked honestly, apologized when they messed up, and stayed even when it was hard. That was the lesson Victoria had learned in the 5 years since that midnight phone call changed her life. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and letting people help you put the pieces back together in a new shape. It was about admitting you couldn't do everything alone and being brave enough to ask for help. It was about loving so fiercely that the possibility of loss couldn't stop you from trying. Because, in the end, the only thing worse than losing someone was never having loved them at all. Victoria had almost made that mistake, almost let fear keep her alone and empty and convinced it was strength. But Ava had saved her from that fate. And Ethan, and even Lucy in her chaotic, joyful way. They'd shown her that being human wasn't a weakness to overcome. It was the whole point. That the messy, complicated, imperfect love of a family was worth more than any corporate achievement or quarterly earnings report. That coming home to people who knew you and loved you anyway was the only success that actually mattered, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was admit you needed someone and let them stay.